Hello and welcome to week 3 of Early Christian History, and we're going to do a full week's worth of stuff. As I found out last week, a full week equals 3 lessons. So we'll have a little bit more content in this week's lesson than we have in the first 2, but we'll present it all and we'll talk about it on Monday after you listen to me talk about it a little bit today. We're going to start off by talking about Nero, a very famous / infamous Roman emperor who was actually born 4 years after Jesus' death and ruled Rome from a very early age for about not quite a 20-year period, but a very significant 20 years in terms of the treatment of Christians at this time. Again, Christianity just getting started, just beginning to move outside of the boundaries of modern-day Israel. Nero is the son of Caesar Augustus. And if Caesar Augustus sounds familiar, that means you've read Luke 2. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. Yeah, he was the Roman emperor that ordered the census, which sent Mary and Joseph to Jerusalem so one of the scriptures could be fulfilled. God works in mysterious and wonderful ways. Now, Caesar Augustus, by all accounts, was a very good emperor, ruling over the massive Roman Empire. He sparked a period of what was called Pax Romana, time of Roman peace under his leadership. But after Caesar Augustus, things went quickly downhill. There were a couple of Caesars, again, Caesar being the title given to the Roman emperor, a couple who were so unpopular that they were quickly assassinated. The fifth man to try for the job was Nero. At the age of 16, his mother helped maneuver him into the position. That's a story in and of itself, but his mother obviously wanted the power as well. Nero showed some genuine humility in his first years as an emperor. We're told that a statue was going to be built in his honor, and Nero asked that it not be done. He reportedly cried when he signed his first death sentence for a criminal. And he was concerned about the Roman gladiator tradition, which had young men fighting to the death for the amusement of others. Unfortunately, that humility and compassion disappeared greatly. It kind of brings to mind King Saul, the first king of Israel. If you remember back from the Old Testament, he started off as a very good king, very obedient to God, but very quickly fell into the trappings of the position and became a very bad king. Nero became a very bad emperor. He was all about indulgence and about the pleasures of the flesh, pleasures of self. He was about Nero's comfort and well-being first and foremost. If you could provide that, you were his friend. If you could not, you were his enemy. He even had his own mother killed for fear of her trying to take over her kingdom. Sounds a little like Herod and his relationship with his family. Of course, with his mother, again, she was a conniver, and it may very well been that she was planning to kill Nero, but he had her killed. He went on a killing spree. His half-brother killed. A wife named Octavia killed. Again, if Nero saw that there was someone even remotely threatening his position as emperor, he had them taken care of. Nero, though, was interesting. Yeah, evil as all get out, cruel, all that, but very interesting insofar as on occasion he would dress up as a commoner and mill about amongst the commoners and get into trouble, break into a place, get arrested. Then the centurions or whomever arrested him finds out this is the emperor. Oh my God. So yeah, he had an odd way about him. I mean, I guess that's okay. But he seemed to spend more time in Greece than in Rome. He was a big lover of Grecian culture, theater, the arts. And that made some of the people in Rome, and Rome proper, very jealous. They were very proud of their culture. Nero clearly favored the Greeks. Now, the Greeks didn't have the military strength at this time that they did a few centuries before, but yeah, all that wonderful Greek culture was still very much evident. The Romans were, again, the people of Rome, that is, were appalled. Nero enjoyed chariot racing. He participated in chariot races in Greece. Nero was told he ought to kill himself rather than bring that much shame to Rome. But he became even more unpopular by publicly trashing the layout of Rome. Again, Rome is not just an empire; it's a state of mind. It's a way of doing things. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Lots of pride there, and a lot of people saw his complaining about the actual layout of the city of Rome as near blasphemy. Again, they worship the empire in many cases. The Great Fire of Rome in AD 64 destroyed about 2/3 of the city. It raged on for about a week. And there is, of course, the famous account of Nero playing the lyre, seen playing the lyre, stringed instrument, in a window while watching the fires burn. The idea is that he might have set the fires himself just to level the city whose layout he hated. Now, I don't know, the popular image now is Nero playing the fiddle while Rome burned. I don't know how we got from a lyre to a fiddle, but it has. And, of course, it's come in contemporary times to mean those instances where a leader does something innocuous while a great tragedy is occurring, that they are ignoring the tragedy. Playing the fiddle while Rome burned has become a metaphor for that. At any rate, that message stuck. Again, a lot of Romans thought he started the fire. Well, he needed to find a scapegoat. He was in trouble. Again, they had murdered 2 Caesars before him. He needed to find a scapegoat. And guess who he picked? The early Christians. Now, what a convenient scapegoat they are. They're already seen as sort of oddballs, even odder than the Jewish people, insofar they worship a dead man. Boy, they're really weird. But they're also peaceful. They're also not going to fight back. They're a perfect person to scapegoat and say, "Oh, look at them, look at these people." The process is called othering people. When you start talking about a group of people in such a way as to deny them their very humanity, and you start treating them as a disease, a blight, that's called othering. That's what Nazis did to Jews in Germany. That's what's being done in some cases today. I'll let you think about that a little bit. But this othering of people, this constant critique of a people and their ways, with the goal of making them seem a little less than human. And if you see someone as less than human, you can justify doing almost anything to them. And thus it happened in Rome. Again, one of the things Nero charged, and others did, is that they were cannibals. Why? That's a serious charge. Well, we know about communion. The process of communing with other Christians by replicating the blood and flesh of Christ. To a non-Christian, yeah, that seems really, really weird. And the Romans latched onto that in another effort to other them, to make them seem like less than human. So, some Christians were found. They died under Nero's persecution. In some cases, they went to the Colosseum to be ripped apart by lions. Others were covered with pitch and raised on poles, set on fire to be used as torches until they literally burned out. I could go into a lot of detail on how it happened. You get the idea. It was horrible, but it was done. Again, remember I was talking about the public spectacle? Hey, look at this. Don't you do this or this will happen to you. That public spectacle. The Christians, of course, are going to keep worshiping God. But again, generally they want to breathe also. So what they did was, in many cases, they took to the catacombs of Rome. Underground chambers where people were buried or interred, in this case. The catacombs were extensive under Rome. Now, they're kind of spooky places, where you're going to store dead bodies, but yeah, these were like long hallways, not a great gathering place, but better than the ones going to get you thrown to the lions. On the walls of these catacombs, even today, you will find the Greek words for Christ, Chi and Rho, those two symbols, drawings of fish which represented a Greek acrostic about Christ. You see evidence of those early Christians holding their services in the catacombs of Rome. Nero became aware of another threat just a few years after the fire. Again, him killing a lot of Christians evidently did not sate the crowd. He went into hiding after a military plot was uncovered against him. He tried to kill himself with a sword, and he couldn't even do that right. A secretary carried it out for him. An odd summary. Nero was an odd man who did some things to be admired, but is mostly remembered for his cruelty, his killing, and for establishing the idea that it's okay to martyr Christians. Martyrs, those who die for a cause, in this case, Christian martyrs, those who die for the cause of Christ. Lesson 5 focuses on some of the higher profile Christian martyrs. Only a couple of them do we really need to remember. There were a lot. And there were different waves of persecution. Nero's, of course, being the first wave. The idea would go, okay, this emperor really cracked down on him, and then there would be a lull period, and then another emperor would need a scapegoat, someone to blame problems on. Christians are right there for you. Then you would get into a third wave, a fourth wave of persecutions, and these lasted for centuries. Of course, the first person to persecute Christians was not Roman, they were Jews. Remember Saul of Tarsus? Eventually, the Jews lost their power in Judea, and if you got no power, you can't persecute anyone. The Romans, of course, as we see, picked up where the Jews left off. Again, Nero ushering in that first wave of Christian persecution. The second onslaught came under Roman, the Emperor Domitian, between AD 81 and 96. Again, like Nero, he made a sport of life and death. He used the Colosseum of Rome that was built by his father, Vespasian, with slave labor, of course. He was Domitian's father. Domitian claimed to have divine power, and he expected to be worshipped like a god himself. Well, there was many who told him where he could put that idea. One of them was the Apostle John. For his impertinence, John was exiled to the Isle of Patmos off the coast of Greece, where he wrote a little book called Revelation. Maybe you've heard of it. The third wave of Christian persecution in the Roman Empire came under the leadership of Trajan. He made it a capital crime to be a Christian. By capital crime, that is to say, a crime punishable by death. The most famous martyr of this period was Ignatius of Antioch. He wrote numerous letters to some of the New Testament churches that Paul had communicated with earlier. The tradition says Ignatius may have been one of the small children that Jesus himself held in his arms to serve as an example for the disciples. We do know this about Ignatius, according to the contemporary accounts of his martyrdom. When he was thrown to the lions in the Colosseum, he responded with a prayer, "I am God's grain to be ground between the teeth of the wild beasts, so that I may become a holy loaf for the Lord." Now, I'm not going to give him high marks for the cleverness of his metaphor there, but it does hopefully underscore, again, the martyr spirit. Yes, I'm willing to die for this. And yes, once again, as we mentioned, the spectacle, not good enough. You're not scaring me. My God is mightier than the spectacle. There were several others executed, martyred during this wave of Christian persecution. The next Roman Emperor Hadrian kept the wave going. In AD 155, another famous martyr was Polycarp. He was martyred during Hadrian's reign. Under Hadrian, Polycarp was asked to renounce his belief in Jesus Christ. He responded, quote, 86 years have I served him, and he never did me any injury. How then can I blaspheme my King and Savior? He was bound at the stake to burn alive. He prayed out loud, Lord God, Father of our blessed Savior, I thank thee that I have been deemed worthy to receive the crown of martyrdom, and that I may die for thee and thy cause. Very touching to actually feel honored to be a martyr. Again, we live at a time where we most certainly will not be called upon to do that. But how heartening it is to know that there have been Christians in the past whose love of Jesus allowed them to look at things this way. People who are that devoted to a religion aren't going to just stop doing it. They're not going to die away. The persecution slowed for a while. We actually had Emperor Antonio Pius who passed a law saying it would be illegal to punish Christians at all, period. Wow, things are getting better, right? Wrong. Marcus Aurelius came along. He was the cruelest since Nero, probably, AD 161 to 180. By this time, the common people of Rome had taken to saying, Christians to the lions anytime something bad happened, because who was going to be blamed? The Christians. So, yeah, it almost became a kind of an odd and very macabre saying. Christians to the lions, something bad happened. One martyr named Justin Martyr, which is where we get the word from, died under Marcus Aurelius. His crime was teaching Christianity to Jews and Gentiles. He wrote down in great detail exactly what Christians believe, exactly what the faith was about. These are called apologies, or this style of writing is called apologetics. We see a lot of it at this time, even from non-Christians who were explaining in an intellectual way, okay, here's what these Christians believe. They believe this, this, and this. In many cases, the apologetics were not Christians themselves, but they were explaining what Christianity is about. Which, again, you get the feeling that the people who were persecuting Christianity, they didn't know what it was about. They just knew these people were weird, and every time something bad happens, they get killed. So it's them getting killed, not me, so I'm okay with that. For his trouble, Justin Martyr was scourged and beheaded. He wrote famously, quote, "You can kill us, but you cannot do us any real harm." I like that. Killing me is not harming me. The message is going through. The spectacle is not scaring us. We're going to keep on. Almost 30 years later, the fifth wave of Christian persecution began. These persecutions all sound terrible, but it got worse, if you can imagine that. Sixth and seventh waves of persecution under the emperors Maximus and Decius. Christians were brutally tortured and killed if they failed to sacrifice to the Roman gods. The eighth persecution, getting on into AD 257 now. 2 full centuries after the death of Christ and then some. Christians were stripped of their property, exiled, forbidden to gather from worship. One famous bishop, Cyprian of Carthage, was banned and later beheaded for refusing to sacrifice to pagan deities. There were 2 more major waves of Christian persecution in Rome, the 9th under Aurelian, the 10th under Diocletian. We'll cover Diocletian for some other things soon here, but again, we have 10 different identifiable waves of persecution by Roman authorities against Christians. These are just the Roman authorities. Now again, Rome controlled pretty much all of the settled world, their world at least, Western Civ. Christians were suffering elsewhere too, at the hands of more than just the Romans. We're going to, for lesson 6 here, we're going to go back a couple of decades, back to the time of Christ's death, and a man named Josephus. He was born about 8 years after Jesus was crucified. He was a very prodigal learner. At the age of 14, there were scholars coming to him to get interpretations on legal texts and whatnot. So he was, a very smart young man. He became a Pharisee, and of course, Pharisee carries a negative connotation with Christians because of the way they viewed Christ and, of course, their persecution of the early Christians. Saul of Tarsus at this time was a well-known Pharisee. Josephus, though, while remaining a faithful and devout Jew all his life, did not persecute Christians. What happened was he went to Rome to argue a case before Nero. He won his case and got the release of some Jewish priests who were being held in Rome. While he was there, though, he was impressed with more than just the wealth and splendor of Rome. He was also impressed with their army. He saw just how powerful these guys were. And of course, there was always that friction occurring in Judea with the Jews and the Roman occupiers. And there were periodic zealot revolts that would be quickly put down. But there was growing sentiment that there was going to be a great Jewish revolt. And Josephus tried to tell his people, look, this is a bad idea. They can crush us. They will crush us. Still, when the great Jewish revolt began in earnest, he was a good Jew. Josephus took a command in Nazareth, actually. Josephus was forced to surrender his small command and was imprisoned for being part of the rebellion. While in prison, he was still an influential man, very respected scholar. In fact, he gained great favor with a Roman commander in the area named Vespasian. Sound familiar? Yeah, this is the guy who would later build the Colosseum as emperor. He was Domitian's father, the one who, again, started the Colosseum. Just so happened, 3 years after Nero died, Vespasian was chosen to be emperor. Pretty convenient for Josephus. He was released from prison because he was in good with the new emperor. The war in Judah, though, continued for the Jews and the Romans. Vespasian actually got Josephus to be an interpreter during the war. So Josephus, again, a good Jew, devout Jew, was in an unenviable situation, working for the enemy, so to speak. But he knew the enemy was stronger. He knew that this was a fool's errand. And sure enough, in the 70th year AD, the war between the Jews and Romans escalated to the point where Rome said, that's enough. We're sending a lot of people. We're going to sack Jerusalem. They did. By Josephus's count, 1.1 million Jews were killed, which is a staggering number. That's probably a third of them. At least. Maybe close to half. They took Jerusalem and, of course, destroyed the second temple, the one that Solomon had built, the one that King Herod had renovated. They broke everything except the Western Wall. The Western Wall still stands today, sometimes called the Wailing Wall, but they reduced the rest of the temple to ashes. They stole every imaginable treasure they could out of the temple, set fire to the temple, tore it down stone by stone. The brass doors were melted into a puddle that the Roman soldiers stomped. They paraded items down the street. They built a famous arch in Rome to honor Titus and his victory over the Jews. The arch displays a lot of the stuff that they stole from the temple there. To the Jews, this destruction was unbearable. Again, Jews had their temple destroyed before. They had been in a diaspora before, that is, scattered. And they were scattered this time. This was too much to recover from. For Josephus, though, again, he was still in favor of the emperor of Rome. he decided to write an exhaustive history of Judaism. Jews from the beginning to end, as he taught it, as he lived it, as he understood it. You could still read the works of Josephus. They're long, interesting though. Besides all this, Josephus includes his own adventures in there too. Josephus famously said people write history for three reasons: to show they can write, for the sake of others, and because they're driven to write history. Josephus was driven to write history, and if not for him, there is an awful lot of this that we simply don't know, that we simply have to guess at. So Josephus, the Pharisee, the historian, is the reason that we're talking about a lot of this stuff with certainty. We'll talk about it with more certainty come Monday. See you then.